Picture a single flame, no bigger than the one on a candle, burning quietly in the corner of a farmhouse kitchen. Above it, locked behind a wooden door, sits a block of ice that the flame itself created. No electricity, no wires, just fire making frost. It sounds impossible. Heat that produces cold. But for a stretch of years in the 1920s and beyond, this was real. Out on farms far from any power line, families kept milk, meat, and butter frozen solid through the hottest months, with one flame. Most people today have never heard of it. The machine had no motor, no compressor, no moving parts at all. It simply sat there, silent, while a tiny kerosene wick did the work that we now hand over to humming electric boxes. To understand how we got here, you have to go back further. Before this flame-driven machine, keeping food cold was a brutal, back-breaking business. And it depended entirely on one thing that came only in winter: ice cut from frozen lakes and rivers. In the 1800s, whole crews would head out onto frozen water with saws and horses. They carved the ice into massive blocks, some weighing 50 pounds or more. Then they hauled them ashore and buried them under sawdust in special ice houses. Believe it or not, that buried ice could last for months. The sawdust acted as insulation. The thick walls of the ice house held out the summer heat. A good harvest in January could keep a town supplied well into the warm season. From those ice houses came the ice box. Not a refrigerator, an actual box. Usually made of wood, lined inside with tin or zinc, with hollow walls packed full of insulation to slow the melting and trap the cold where the food sat. The design was simple and clever. A block of ice went into a compartment up top. Cold air sinks, so it fell down over the shelves below, chilling everything in its path. Meltwater drained away into a tray you had to empty by hand. These ice boxes had several doors. One door, often the smallest, opened to hold the ice itself. The others held the food. And every few days, that ice ran out, which meant you needed someone to bring you more, again and again. That someone was the Iceman. He drove a wagon through the streets, hauling blocks weighing 25 or 50 pounds. Families put a card in the window telling him how much to bring. Then he carried it inside, dripping, on a leather-padded shoulder. Now think about that for a moment. Your ability to keep food from rotting depended on a man and a wagon. If he didn't come, your milk soured, your meat spoiled. In the city, that worked. Out on the farm, it was a different story. Farms sat miles from town. No iceman came down those long dirt lanes. And when electricity finally arrived, it reached the cities first. The countryside waited years, sometimes decades, for the power lines to stretch out that far. So the farmer was stuck. This is where the story turns, because somebody figured out how to make cold without ice, without an iceman, and without a single wire running to the house. They did it with heat. And the idea behind it is almost 100 years older than you'd think. The secret is a principle called absorption refrigeration. The basic science was understood back in the 1800s. But it took until the 1920s for two clever students to turn it into a box that could sit in your kitchen and freeze your food. Here is the part that breaks people's brains. Cold is not really a thing you make. Cold is just the absence of heat. So, to make something cold, you don't add cold. You take the heat out of it and carry that heat somewhere else. Think about stepping out of a swimming pool on a windy day. You shiver. Why? Because the water on your skin is evaporating. And as a liquid turns into a vapor, it pulls heat away with it. That simple trick is the heart of the whole machine. The flame-powered refrigerator used a special liquid for this, ammonia. It boils and evaporates at a very low temperature, far colder than water. When that ammonia evaporates inside the cold compartment, it sucks heat out of the air, out of your milk, out of everything around it. But here's the problem. Once the ammonia turns to vapor, you can't just throw it away. That would be madness. You have to catch it, turn it back into a liquid, and use it again, over and over, in an endless loop. And that takes energy. In your modern fridge, an electric motor does that job. It runs a compressor that squeezes the vapor back into liquid. It hums. It clicks on and off. It needs power day and night, and it sends you a bill every single month for the privilege. The old flame machine had no motor. So how did it complete the loop? This is the genius part. Instead of squeezing the vapor with a pump, it dissolved the ammonia vapor into water. Ammonia loves water. It soaks right in, like sugar into tea. That is where the word absorption comes from. The water absorbs the spent vapor. And now you have ammonia dissolved in water, ready to be used again. But you need to get it back out of the water. And for that, finally, you need the flame. The little kerosene flame heated that ammonia and water mixture in a chamber called the generator. Heat the mix, and the ammonia boils back out as a vapor, leaving the water behind. The flame, in other words, was the engine. Fire took the place of the electric motor. Let that sink in. The same heat we usually fight against in summer, the very thing that spoils our food, was turned into the force that froze it. Heat driving cold. It feels like a contradiction. It is actually one of the most elegant tricks ever built. There was one more piece of brilliance hidden inside. To keep everything flowing without a single pump, the inventors added a third gas, hydrogen, into the sealed pipes. It balanced the pressure throughout the system. No moving parts. Nothing to wear out. Nothing to break. Think about what that means. A machine sealed for life. No belts. No motor to burn out. No gears to grind down. Just a closed loop of liquid and gas circulating silently, driven by nothing more than a flame the size of your thumb. And it was Quiet. Dead quiet. There was no hum, no rattle, no sudden clunk in the middle of the night. People who owned one often said the strangest thing about it was the silence. A cold machine that made no sound at all. Now, this same era tried other paths too. Some early refrigerators ran on electricity using a gas called sulfur dioxide as the refrigerant. It worked. But sulfur dioxide is toxic, and a leak could fill a kitchen with choking fumes. The flame machine avoided that danger entirely. There was even an early electric cooling unit from around 1914, a little device that showed promise. But it still needed wires. It still needed the grid. And the grid simply did not exist for millions of people living out past the edge of town. That is the whole reason the flame refrigerator mattered so much. It didn't care about the grid. It didn't care if you lived 50 miles from the nearest pole. As long as you had a little kerosene and a match, you had refrigeration. Real refrigeration. And it didn't just chill. It froze. The cold compartment got cold enough to freeze water solid. Families filled little metal trays, set them inside, and by morning they had ice cubes. Real ice made by a flame in the dead heat of August. Imagine being a farm wife in 1925. For your whole life, summer meant racing against rot. Milk that turned by noon. Meat you had to salt or smoke or eat right away. And now, suddenly, a quiet box in the corner kept it all fresh. It changed daily life completely. No more waiting on the iceman. No more emptying drip trays. No more food thrown out because it spoiled before you could eat it. One flame tended a couple of times a day, and the whole problem simply disappeared. These machines were tough too. With no moving parts, there was almost nothing to fail. Many ran for decades. Some are still running today, nearly a century later, in places where people choose to live without the grid. Try getting that from a modern fridge. So here's the question that should bother you. If this technology was this good, this simple, this reliable, then why did almost everyone forget it? Why don't you see one in every home? Why is this the first time many of you are even hearing about it? The answer isn't a grand conspiracy. It's simpler and, in a way, sadder. The power lines finally caught up. Through the 1930s and 1940s, the grid spread out into the countryside. And once cheap electricity arrived, the loud electric fridge took over. And think about who benefits from which machine. A sealed flame box you buy once and run for 50 years makes no one any money after the sale. A machine that pulls power from the grid every hour of every day, now that is a different business. That's not a secret plot. It's just the quiet pull of money and convenience. The thing that never breaks and never needs the grid slowly fades from the catalogues. The thing that keeps you connected and keeps you paying becomes the only option on the shelf. And so a brilliant idea got buried not by force, but by forgetting. A generation that knew how to make cold from fire grew old. Their children plugged in and never asked how the old box worked. The knowledge just quietly slipped away. But the science never stopped being true. Heat still drives cold. Ammonia still boils at a frigid temperature. A flame can still complete that endless loop. The principle that froze food in 1925 works exactly the same way on a hot afternoon today. In fact, the very same idea is still quietly working all around you. That little fridge humming in a hotel room. The cooler in some recreational vehicles. Many of them use this exact absorption trick, run on a small flame or a heating element, no compressor at all. So it was never really lost. It just went quiet, hidden in plain sight, doing its work where you'd never think to look. The flame that froze a farmer's milk 100 years ago is the same flame cooling a drink in a quiet room tonight. Maybe that's the real lesson hiding in this old machine. The cleverest ideas don't always survive because they're the best. Sometimes the quiet, unbreakable thing gets pushed aside by the loud one that keeps you paying. And sometimes the smartest answer was already burning a century ago.